It's Thursday, the 6th of October, and this is Politics Live. And with me today, the Conservative peer Ed Vaizey, Labour MP Belle Ribeiro Addy, comedian Matt Ford and the Daily Telegraph's Olivia Utley. Today, after her big conference speech, the Prime Minister gets back to work. Liz Truss arrives in Prague for a summit of European leaders, but is her premiership back on track?
It's laughable that we've got a Prime Minister that is now saying that there's an anti-growth coalition. She is the leader of that anti-growth coalition.
We'll assess the state of the two main parties after their conferences, also today.
I would love to be having a front page of the Telegraph with a plane taking off to Rwanda. That's my dream.
But will the Home Secretary's dream become a reality?
Vladimir Vladimirovich Putin.
And what does history tell us about how to deal with Russia today? So it's been a pretty turbulent week for the Conservative Party and Liz Truss in particular, after a conference marred by divisions. Not exactly an ideal run-up to her big conference speech yesterday, but let's see how some of the papers have been reporting it this morning. We start with the Daily Mail. Defiant Liz takes fight to her critics. Next up, we have the Times. U-turn or face election wipeout, Truss is warned. Then The Guardian, Truss delivers a new common enemy to fractured Tory party. And the Financial Times, rallying cry, Truss attacks anti-growth coalition in bid to get her premiership back on track. Is it back on track, Ed Vaizey?
Well, I mean, it was a workmanlike speech which got her through her big day at conference, which was obviously yesterday. And it did, to a certain extent, balance what had been up till then a pretty disastrous conference with the U-turn on the 45p tax rate, and then the Cabinet basically declaring civil war on each other, and then the ex-Cabinet ministers coming in on each flank. So she's got through that, and now she's in Prague, which this European political community. But I suspect that when the House of Commons gets back normal service, as in what conference was like on Monday and Tuesday, may be resumed, she's still got to get her benefit uprating debate through, and there'll be numerous other things. And then you've got this extraordinary attack on her from Nadine Dorries, who is an extraordinary political figure who spent her time rebelling against David Cameron, rebelling against Theresa May, became a cabinet minister under Boris Johnson, told everyone that the Tories' secret weapon was loyalty and everyone should be 100% loyal. And within a month of backing Liz Truss for leadership is now telling her she needs a general election because she's gone far too far to the right and abandoned the centre ground.
Comprehensive roundup of everything. Belle, what's your view?
It was a complete disaster for Liz Truss. I can't see it in any other terms. I don't see how she's going to recover from this. Pretty much most of the country is angry at her, and understandably so. She wants to come back into Parliament thinking that she may have sorted things out a bit in order to cut people's benefits, in order to push people into more poverty. No one's going to stand for that. So, very, very strangely, for the first time, and perhaps the only time ever, I agree with Nadine Dorries. We need a general election.
Quite a declaration there. Matt, you've got a new show coming up. I imagine there's quite a lot of material now.
Oh, yes. Yeah, I'm very grateful to the Tory party for writing my current tour for me, so I'm very grateful for that. That's at the Leicester Square Theatre in the Bloomsbury in a couple of weeks. Right. When I first started performing it, Queen Elizabeth was on the throne and Boris Johnson was Prime Minister, and now Liz Truss is Prime Minister, and God knows who will be next week, because the state of it, I mean, I think what's really fascinating is the Tories feel like an opposition now. That Liz Truss speech felt like something that would have followed IDS in the early to mid-noughties. This feels like a party out of ideas, out of personalities. Whatever I thought of Boris Johnson, he gave the party a level of confidence that projected through the screen. Now they're sat there having to pretend that this was a great speech. Certain politicians can turn the weather round, and I worked for the Labour Party when Tony Blair and Gordon Brown were Prime Minister. They possessed the class and the gravitas to be able to affect the political weather. Liz Truss is not the sort of politician that will ever turn this round. She's never going to deliver a great speech. She's never going to inspire the country. She feels like an opposition leader that breaks the back, that a party finally says, we need to get someone electable after this. Keir Starmer, by contrast, looks like a prime minister. I mean, the mood in the two parties is completely different.
I mean, unbelievably, it has only been a month since Liz Truss came in. Olivia, I just want to show you this, actually. This is 2 covers of The Spectator. We've got one from exactly a month ago, Buckle Up, and then the second one, Crash Course. So I think it's fairly clear what the message is there from The Spectator. I mean, in your view, how has she done? Did the speech yesterday go any way into helping her?
I agree with Ed, I think, partially. I think that it was a sort of workmanlike speech and it got her through. I think her problem over the last couple of weeks is she's come out with this very big, bold growth plan, and I think it did have some very good stuff in it. The problem was that she didn't lay the groundwork at all. She didn't get the country ready for it. She didn't get the markets ready for it. As far as we were concerned, we were all just sort of sitting there minding our own business, hoping for a bit of quiet after the Queen's funeral and after all of the dramas with Boris Johnson. And we sort of were expecting a safe pair of hands. And then Kwasi Kwarteng gets up and does this huge growth budget, doesn't explain how he's going to pay for it, doesn't explain who it's supposed to benefit, doesn't explain the point. And I think Truss yesterday went some way towards sort of explaining that she felt as though the country was reaching the end of the road. The status quo wasn't working. We were looking like we were sliding into 5 quarters of recession, and the only thing for it was to come up with a new, big, bold strategy, which is what she did. And I think the speech did partially explain what she was up to, but I think it might be too little too late.
But let's stick with this a little bit. One of the things she seemed to try and attempt to do yesterday was identify a common enemy, the anti-growth coalition. Let's have a little listen to that.
I will not allow the anti-growth coalition to hold us back. They prefer protesting to doing. They prefer talking on Twitter to taking tough decisions. They taxi from North London townhouses to the BBC studio to dismiss anyone challenging the status quo. From broadcast to podcast, they peddle the same old answers.
I suppose the question is, Ed, do you live in a townhouse? And are you a member of the anti-growth coalition?
I did taxi in from West London for this programme, but I also taxi in for other media providers, not just paid for by the BBC licence fee. And I was tempted to say that there are, certain cabinet ministers that take government cars to, fashionable restaurants in central London who might want to kind of look to themselves before they start throwing stones in glass houses. But I don't think the anti-growth coalition doesn't have a particular ring to me. It's not what I feel that people in the dog and duck are talking about. Look, I mean, to be loyal for a second, if you'd asked me about Kwasi Kwarteng's mini budget in the pub, as it were, it wasn't a mini budget. Do I think the top rate, the 45p tax rate, could come down? Yes, I did. Do I think you could reduce income tax? Yes, I do. Is it good to keep corporation tax low and competitive? Of course it is. But the politics of it was so bad, and that's what the Tory party is now living with. And I don't think the trouble with the anti-growth coalition is I was a member of the anti-growth coalition as a Tory MP representing a rural constituency opposing any house building in my constituency, while at the same time on a national level saying we should build hundreds of thousands of houses. I got to Birmingham in an hour and a half. Soon, we hope, when HS2 opens, it'll be 48 minutes. But it's taken a long time because the anti-growth coalition of Tory MPs along that line understandably, in the interest of their constituents, opposed it. So it's a difficult argument for her to run.
Yeah, Olivia, you're nodding.
Yeah, I think that's exactly the problem. There are far too many Tories who are very close to Truss who are part of this anti-growth coalition. There are even, tweets this morning saying, we can't let the anti-growth coalition win. We've got to have this big, bold plan for growth. And then you go 3 tweets down and it's no more homes in my constituency.
Name them.
Which I've got a name in my head, actually. But I think that's exactly the problem. The anti-growth coalition is, of course, it's nice for Truss to be able to point at the sort of metropolitan elites who she knows that there are plenty of people in the country who they're suspicious of, and that's all very well, the kind of lefties who do their own podcasts and stuff, but it's not just them. It's a lot of Tory MPs too.
Yeah, it's interesting. You kind of from the NIMBY angle, there's a story this morning. Many of you will be aware that Jeremy Clarkson has a farm in Oxfordshire, but there's a story this morning. I think we can see the headline there. Jeremy Clarkson told to shut diddly squat farm's dining areas. I assumed Diddley Scott is the name of the farm. I don't know that to be the case. But
where have you been for the last 2 years?
I'm clearly not watching the programme about Jeremy Clarkson's farm. But yeah, so he's been told by the local council that he has to close down because of planning laws and that sort of thing. So is the West Oxfordshire Council a part of the anti-growth coalition?
Yes, I mean, I was an Oxfordshire MP, and the planning in Oxfordshire is an absolute nightmare, although lots of houses have been built in my constituency, showing how effectively I was as a constituency MP. And it is just be unbelievably boring now. I was the broadband minister, and I say the trouble with broadband is not technology, it's planning. You would have a Tory council, Kensington Chelsea Council, refusing to put in broadband cabinets because they didn't look nice on the pavement. I mean, the planning system in this country, I'm all for property rights and people should have their say, but we cannot get anything built.
Yeah, Belle, how would Labour tackle this?
Well, firstly, just to say that she is the head, Liz Truss, of this anti-growth coalition, so she needs to stop with all of that nonsense, just as Lisa Nandy was saying. But we need to look at investing for growth. As far as I'm concerned, all of the plans that the Tories have at the moment all benefit the richest in society. So at the moment, we've got a situation where they're planning 18.7 billion cuts to benefits in order to fund their corporation tax. How on earth is that going to fund your average person who, we're looking at in-work poverty. We're looking at people not able to pay their energy bills, and they're still just pushing down on this really disastrous budget instead of scrapping it altogether. They're wrong and needs to come forward and admit that.
Matt?
I think they've completely failed to readjust to the fact that Keir Starmer's leading the Labour Party and not Jeremy Corbyn. These sort of attack lines might have worked 3 or 4 years ago when you had effectively a communist running the Labour Party. But Keir Starmer's already ruled out a coalition with the SNP and has had major rows in Scotland as a result of that. It's been very visible. So lumping him in with a coalition with other parties has not readjusted to the facts of the case. Calling him anti-growth and making out that he's some sort of lefty campaigner. This guy's a knight of the realm. He used to be the Director of Public Prosecutions. The public do not see Keir Starmer as some sort of crusty communist. They see him as a patriotic Prime Minister in waiting, and the Tories have to readjust their tack lines accordingly.
Do you accept that, Olivia?
I think that Keir Starmer's done a very good job, actually, of positioning himself as the sort of person who the country does want to elect. I think that, actually, the problem with Liz Truss's budget, which I personally thought there was a lot of very good stuff in there, but I think what she seems to have failed to realise is that the country at large is economically very left-wing and actually quite authoritarian. And, there were, 25% of the country wanted to see nightclubs closed for good, even after COVID was over. It's genuinely true. And would like to see... No, true, that's encouraging. But and would like to see everything under the sun nationalised. A huge percentage wants to see groceries nationalised. So actually, the country is pretty left-wing economically. And obviously, the problem with Jeremy Corbyn was that he wasn't a patriot, didn't come across as a patriot, and the country is very patriotic. So if you've got a kind of left-wing Prime Minister in waiting who also appears patriotic, it will be quite tempting to the country. And Liz Truss hasn't done a good enough job of explaining why her low-tax, small-state conservatism is the way forward. I mean, I think it is, and I thought some of what she said yesterday did explain that, but it's just not quite enough.
Just what exactly is patriotism, though? I think people just try and label it as, flag waving, supporting the state, supporting the police.
I think.
But if the most important thing in this country are the people of this country, then Labour will always be the most patriotic party because we're doing things for the most of the people.
I think people felt that Jeremy Corbyn wasn't a patriot because he was supportive of the IRA, supportive of Hamas. I mean, there are quite a lot of reasons why
because he didn't want to wave a flag. I just feel
he did, but it was the Palestinian flag.
And what's wrong with the Palestinian flag?
Well, no, but if you're favouring that over your own country's flag, it looks weird.
Yeah, I didn't see him favouring that over.
Well, he just said that singing the national anthem was weird at the Labour Party conference.
Well, to be fair, that's because we haven't done it before.
I mean, I'm not...
that tells its own story.
I've never been convinced that Keir Starmer was a Prime Minister in waiting, and I actually thought Boris Johnson would beat him. But I want to encourage Belle to spend the next 2 years talking about Jeremy Corbyn's legacy, because I think that is one thing that Liz Truss will grasp, grasp with both hands.
Interesting you mentioned that, so let's just have a look, actually. There's a poll from YouGov of leaders' personal ratings, and you will see Liz Truss there. I mean, her personal popularity ratings below that of Jeremy Corbyn in June 2019 and below Boris Johnson as well. I mean, is there any coming back from that, Ed?
It's a very good question. I mean, you know, was the mini-budget Black Wednesday in the sense that when the Tories lost control of interest rates because of the ERM in 1992, we got back on track and delivered a fantastic economy and got absolutely thrashed in the 1997 election. And people waited 5 years to thrash us. I mean, we had 5 years to turn it around. Liz Truss has got 18 months. I mean, it was, you know, you could say it was a moment. It's not a sustained catastrophe. It was a moment which she quickly corrected. And I've been saying ever since that if we can get through the winter relatively unscathed, the public, in terms of rising interest rates and inflation and rising food prices and energy prices, and they feel we'll come back in the spring and debate it, Belle, and the public feel the government have actively helped them to get through that, then I think Liz Truss does have a chance.
But there's a difference there. I mean, you said 18 months, then Grant Shapps said days. I mean, what? Yes,
I mean, I think of all the things the Tory party has managed to do in the last week or so, or indeed over the last year or so, getting rid of their fourth Prime Minister, I've genuinely lost count, would be, I think, borderline insanity now.
But the party is borderline insane, so it wouldn't necessarily be a surprise.
I can't see it happening, but, you know, Vasey political predictions are not, you know, there are not a host of them out there that you can look back on and say with authority that I can predict the future. But it would be very odd indeed to now try and oust our Prime Minister.
It would be odd, but you admit that the party won't survive with her.
No, I think if she can get us through the winter, then I think she has a chance. As I say, although I think Keir Starmer is better placed now to win the election, I do not believe that the public decided, in a way they decided, I suspect, with Blair, that he was Prime Minister. And it's arguable whether Major might have beaten John Smith if he had stayed in position.
Yeah, you mentioned getting through the winter. The reports yesterday of brutal discipline being instilled in the party going forward.
Yeah, this is interesting. This is, you know, I'm going to take the whip away from you. I mean, you know, I had the whip taken away from me by Boris, and it was galling to have somebody who'd been a serial rebel against Theresa May and then brought her down, sacking me for disloyalty, for voting for what I believed in. But I think that there'll be a lot of Tory MPs who will take that with a large bucket full of salt if they're going to try and impose discipline on them. You know, you can't go out and promote a 45p tax cut, get your troops over the line to defend it, and then do a U-turn, and then say, and this is now a make or break policy, and we'll take the whip away from you if you don't vote for it.
Olivia?
Yeah, I think one of Liz Truss's problems is that the Conservative Party in Parliament don't feel particular loyalty to her. She didn't win them their seats in a way that you could argue Boris Johnson did, and only, 51 of them voted for her in the first round of the leadership election. I think that posed a massive problem for her, and I think she's right to say that we need discipline, and I think the Tory MPs are wrong not to accept that she did win fair and square in the leadership election. It wasn't a coronation, and, you know, she was put in front of the public over and over and over again, and she did win fair and square. I think they didn't like the way that the system worked, now feel that she shouldn't be there because they didn't particularly want her there, so they've become pretty disloyal. So I can completely understand why she feels the need to instill discipline, but I do agree with Ed that if you're then going to do U-turns, having pushed people out on the radio to defend your policy, it puts you in a bit of a sticky position.
Is that a fair point, though, Ed, that she did win, and actually, you know, you could look at it the other way and say it's people like Michael Gove, it's people causing trouble that will be the ones to blame for disunity?
Yeah, I do think that's a fair point, and I was a Rishi Sunak supporter, but what I said during the leadership election as it became clear that Liz was going to win was she won fair and square, and that's, you know, it's not an easy leadership election. Admittedly, it's a small electorate, but it was a tough and gruelling contest, and she won that based on the rules of politics, if you like, and therefore she does deserve the support of Conservative MPs. I mean, the point is that we've been at war for so long that there is an element, you know, when you see Michael Gove go out and give Liz Truss a kicking over the 45B tax rate, of kind of former cabinet ministers. Admittedly, Liz has always been a loyal member of the cabinets that she served in, but there are a lot of former cabinet ministers who think we had to take a lot of stick when we were in cabinet from recalcitrant backbenchers. Well, I'm now going to be a recalcitrant backbencher for the next 18 months and see how you like it.
OK. Well, I mean, you know, talking about discipline, there was certainly huge amounts of that at Labour Party conference this year, wasn't there, Belle? Let's take a look now. This is we have a clip of you speaking at the Socialist Campaign Group rally. Let's listen to that.
Those of you that have left the party, why have you left me? Why have you left us? Yet some of you have been kicked out, but the rest of you, why have you left us? I don't think you understand just how much that is exactly what they want you to do. That's what they want you to do. They cannot kick out all of you. So the rest of you, they were hoping to make it as hostile as possible so that you leave. I absolutely tell you to rejoin.
So, Belle, I mean, I mentioned there was discipline, there was a feeling of unity at the Labour Party conference this year in Liverpool, but listening to you speaking there, that didn't sound particularly kind of friendly. You were referring to they. Who were you talking about? And do you really feel so to your heart that you have been pushed out, or that people that like you have been pushed out of the party?
Well, there are a lot of people that have left the Labour Party. We were the largest political party in Western Europe. We had hundreds of thousands of members. A lot of people have left.
Well, you still have hundreds of thousands of members.
But we don't have as many as we did. And there are a lot of people that are showing dissatisfaction. Like any political party, we have our differences amongst each other. I don't think anybody should leave. The Labour Party is a broad church, but a certain section of the party feel like they have to go, and I think that's wrong. I think leaving that tradition, some people have complained about socialists and people towards the left, but they have always been a massive part of the party. So them leaving, I think that's wrong. And I think there are some elements of the party that want to see that.
Matt?
Well, of course there are. I mean, the Labour Party, under the guidance of that wing of the party, had its worst defeat in 2019 since the 1930s. 200,000 members may have left. The Labour Party is now 30% ahead in the polls. There's a clear correlation between how the country feels about the party and how elements of the Labour Party, frankly, that should never have been allowed in, feel about itself. The Labour Party is a mainstream patriotic party, and people like Clement Attlee and Nye Bevan would turn in their graves when they saw what Jeremy Corbyn and his clique did to the party, and the way it treated Jewish people was a disgrace. So I'm glad those people have left, because finally the country has the chance to vote for a party that isn't getting investigated by the Equalities and Human Rights Commission, isn't spreading hatred towards minorities in this country. And the Keir Starmer's leadership, finally, people in the centre ground. What, it wasn't investigated by the
It was investigated, but I don't think it's fair to say that everybody that's left has been for that reason. So there are a lot of people that have left for other...
So they liked it when it was being investigated, and they don't like it now?
I don't think they did, but what you have to realise is there are a lot of people who were of that particular tradition, who were there when Blair was in power, who were there when Brown was in power. They now feel like they have to leave, and I think that that's wrong. I think we should maintain that broad church. Obviously, there's absolutely no place for any form of discrimination within our party, but we have different groups who are feeling discriminated against, and that should be taken into account as well. I don't think it's right that anybody should leave. The Labour Party, in my view, is representative of the people of this country, which means it should include all types of people of this country of varying political opinions.
Well, you can't include every political opinion.
No, obviously not the Conservative type of political, but the Labour Party is a broad church, and there are people that come from slightly different traditions, but we all believe in the same thing. We believe in equality. We believe in diversity.
I don't think you do believe in the same thing. I think the radical hard left have an authoritarian streak that is not shared by the mainstream centre left.
I think when you strip down some of the differences, you will find that ultimately personalities, individuals, all of those different things have got involved, but ultimately people in the Labour Party believe in the same thing.
OK, all right, thank you very much. That was just demonstrating there that it isn't entirely all plain sailing in the Labour Party.
Well, I'm not a member anymore, so
right.
And that's a shame. I think you should rejoin, regardless of what your views are. Please do.
No, I don't want to.
You are welcome.
Well, thank you.
All I was going to say was, speaking as a viewer, that was a great discussion.
Well,
cheers,
excellent. Thanks. Well, we're pleased, happy to have a satisfied customer. We're going to move on now and talk a little bit about immigration. The Home Secretary, Suella Braverman, has signalled that she does intend to continue with the Rwanda policy that was set in train by her predecessor, Priti Patel. Let's have a little listen to her now on the Telegraph's Choppers Politics podcast.
I would love to be having a front page of the Telegraph with a plane taking off to Rwanda. That's my dream.
She has a dream, Ed.
Well, I just choked on my coffee there, but I'll try and get back on to...
It's unclear if that's as a result of the...
Priti Patel had a reputation as quite a right-wing Home Secretary, but I think Suella's going to make her look like the Vicar of Dibley, if that's anything to go by. It's quite impressive stuff. I mean, I find this debate quite difficult and complex because I'm not in practice against processing asylum seekers offshore. Oliver Letwin proposed it when we were in opposition, and Oliver Letwin cannot exactly be described as a kind of hard right wing of the Tory party. And this is such an unbelievably complicated problem because the amount of refugees in the world at the moment. A lot of them are in near countries, as it were. Lots of refugees in Jordan, for example, millions of them. No one is expecting Britain to take every asylum seeker, and people naturally, obviously, do not want people traffickers to profit from illegal and dangerous crossings which put lives at risk and which circumvent the right processes to deal with asylum seekers. I've always taken refuge in the fact that, you know, there needs to be a European-wide policy on this, on processing this. I find the language quite brutal. I find the kind of let's send them all to Rwanda quite a hard one to take. But I don't, in practice, or in theory, if you like, resile from the fact that it is legitimate for the government to want to process as many asylum seekers legally out of country and to try and make a dent in this terrible crime of people trafficking.
That aspect of it, is that legitimate, Bill?
I don't think so. I don't think it's morally right. It's not in line with our international duty, with our duties under international law. I think the idea that people that are fleeing some of the worst conditions in the world that are coming, and just to point out, there are not that many. We take amongst the lowest number across Europe, literally because we are an island and it's harder to get to us. The idea that we are just pushing them out in a way that is questionable, it's been questioned by the courts in our land, it's been questioned by the courts in Europe, is just plain wrong. And having dreams about it, some people dream of better things like world peace. She's dreaming of shoving people in their most inhumane way on a flight to another country. It's ridiculous.
Olivia.
Well, I agree with a lot of what Ed said there. Again, I think that, you know, you've got thousands of people coming to this country on small boats. They are very desperate people, but they may not be the most desperate people, because the most desperate people are often stuck in camps in their own countries, unable to get out because they don't have the money to pay people smugglers. And those are the refugees who I think we should be inviting into this country. And I think that the system is you know, swollen up by people who have the money to pay people traffickers, and that's not how it should be working. Clearly, I think from a humanitarian perspective, the way what's happening now isn't fair, isn't working. I think that the problem that Priti Patel and now Suella Braverman both have is that there's actually not very much they can do. They are hamstrung by international law, and they're hamstrung by the fact that the French, they always talk, you know, and Yvette Cooper's doing it now, talking about how we'll talk to the French, unlike the Tories. Well, everyone's tried to talk to the French for myriad reasons. It's impossible to negotiate a sensible deal with the French. So Suella Braverman is sort of getting her rhetoric's just inflating all the time, and she's sounding more and more, saying all these things which I don't think she quite means.
Yeah, aside from the kind of the rhetoric, is the policy right in your view?
I think there is a very good argument for processing illegal immigrants offshore, because it's a very good deterrent, and not because you want to dream of seeing a plane flying off to Rwanda, but because you want people to use the safe and legal routes to come to the UK rather than the unsafe and illegal ones. But I think the Rwanda policy, as was shown earlier in the summer, is very flawed, because it's basically impossible to actually deport anyone, and it ends up being very, very expensive. So I think, although in theory it's a sensible idea, if it's just in terms of a deterrent, which I think is what it's supposed to be there for, in practice it's not actually working particularly well.
Matt?
Well, maybe I should rejoin the Labour Party, because I agreed with everything Belle said, so immediately we're going to build a bridge. But I just think no one's against controls on immigration. Well, a few people might be, but not in the mainstream. Most people agree that you have to have controls. It's the tone around it and relishing packing people off and kind of laughing and joking about it. I just find really sad. And I mean, I'm one of those people that never really remembers the dreams they have, and I think that's a great shame. But the idea that if you're Suella Braverman, you wake up from a peaceful night's sleep having dreamt of this stuff, I find mildly... maybe she needs to stop eating cheese before she goes to bed.
Maybe. Well, you mentioned, Olivia, about how, you know, the practicalities of the policy. I think that there was an article in the Daily Mail this morning that mentions a new immigration bill. We can see that their new immigration law will make Rwanda deportations plans simpler by removing delay mechanism, sources say. I mean, would you support that, Ed?
Well, I would support a sane and fair immigration policy. I mean, I don't think we should leave the European Convention on Human Rights, and it was the European Court that made that ruling that delayed the initial Rwandan flight. But I do understand the criticism of the European Court that there's judicial overreach in that respect. I mean, it was interesting in terms of my sort of knocking Liz Truss at the beginning of the programme. I think it is very encouraging. Two things that have encouraged me about the Tory party is the fact that she's out at this European political community meeting in Prague today, and the kind of stuff Steve Baker is saying about the Northern Ireland protocol. So those are good signs, and I think reneging on the European Convention would be a very bad move.
So just to press you a little then, if it were to come before the House of Lords, are you saying you wouldn't vote for it?
Well, I mean, I'm a politician, so let me just say I would read the bill with care and take a decision after weighing up all the arguments.
OK, very
Whatever it is, it's going to be disastrous coming from this government, as far as I'm concerned. Look at what they've done with the Windrush scandal. At the end of the day, they just keep drilling down on this, we've got to reduce migration, we've got to reduce migration. They're not even doing that, and they're not even considering what they should be doing to actually welcome people to this country that are needed to work in this country. I have no confidence that any immigration policy brought by this government in the coming months is going to be remotely workable. And it's just going to always be too expensive if the moral arguments aren't good enough for people. Too expensive, completely immoral.
OK. All right. Well, we are going to move on now and talk about Russia and Ukraine. We can speak now to our correspondent, Hugo Bachega, who's actually in Kyiv for us this lunchtime. Hello, Hugo. Can you, I guess, just give us the latest from where you are?
Yeah, so I think this morning we saw that attack in the city of Zaporizhia. A residential area was hit in the city of Zaporizhia in the south of the country. We had an update from the local officials saying 1 person was killed, 12 injured, 21 were rescued. And we saw an entire block of flats completely destroyed by this attack. The officials there say that 7 missiles hit the city at around 5 a.m. local time. So many people were sleeping when this attack happened. Then hours later, there was a second attack and more explosions were heard in the city. And Zaporizhia is very close to the front lines in that part of the country. It is the regional capital of the Zaporizhia region, one of the 4 regions that Russia said it was annexing. So it has become a target by Russian forces and has been frequently attacked in recent weeks.
We've just seen some of those terrible pictures from Zaporizhia there, Hugo. How does what has happened today fit into the wider picture of what has been going on since those referendums in the 4 regions, with what many people have called the sham referendums that have taken place in those parts of Ukraine?
So what we're seeing is that the Ukrainians are going ahead with this counter-offensive, and they've made some significant gains. In the east of the country, they've reclaimed important towns and villages. We've been talking about the town of Liman in the Donetsk region, a town that was being used as a major logistics and transport hub by the Russians. And now it seems that the Ukrainians are also advancing towards Luhansk. And in the last 2 days, they've managed to retake several villages in the Luhansk region. And they're now also advancing in the south, in the Kherson region. They're now reclaiming some territory along the Dnipro River. So it's very significant that they're not only regaining territory in the east, but also in the south. And this is happening in those regions that President Putin said are now part of Russia. He signed yesterday the decree making it official, annexing those 4 regions of Ukraine, even though his army doesn't control the totality of those regions, and everybody outside Russia has condemned this decision. The Ukrainians here say that by attacking civilian sites, this is the way Russia is responding to these military defeats. Moscow has been attacking civilian infrastructure, power stations, electricity, transmission lines, residential buildings across the country, and I think today the Ukrainians are going to say that this is another example of the Russians attacking civilian targets as it continues to suffer military defeats on the battlefield.
OK, Hugo Bachega in Kyiv, thank you very much for joining us this lunchtime. Well, now we are also joined by Orlando Figes, who is a historian and author of the new book, The Story of Russia. Thank you very much for joining us this lunchtime. I just wonder, I mean, your book is about the history of Russia. What does that history tell us about the situation we are facing now?
Well, apart from it being a history of Russia over the last 1,000 years, it's also a study of the ideas, the stories which the Russians have told themselves about their past. And I think those ideas, mythologies, if you like, are incredibly important for what's happening in the war now, because it's really a war about history as far as Mr. Putin's concerned. I mean, that now infamous essay he wrote in July 2021 on the historical unity of Russians and Ukrainians was all about history, all about the idea that Ukraine was really always part of Greater Russia, and that whenever it tried to break away from their big Russian brothers, they found themselves coming under the influence of Western powers who used Ukraine to attack Russia. And that has been the rhetoric of the regime in fighting this war. Although, as you know, you've been pointing out in your last clip there, the referenda in these annexed territories are a sign that they're losing that war over whether it's Ukrainians who really belong to Russia. And so they need yet another layer to lay on the story to say, well, Russia is being attacked. By annexing these regions, they can do precisely that, and perhaps convince the population, which wouldn't necessarily support a war against Ukraine if they had the full knowledge about what was really going on.
Yeah, indeed. Orlando, could I just play you now? I'd like you to listen to this clip from Liz Truss from yesterday speaking at the Conservative Party conference.
Putin's illegal annexation of Ukrainian territory is just the latest act in his campaign to subvert democracy and violate international law. We should not give in to those who want a deal which trades away Ukrainian land. They are proposing to pay in Ukrainian lives for the illusion of peace. We will stand with our Ukrainian friends, however long it takes. Ukraine can win, Ukraine must win, and Ukraine will win.
OK, that was Liz Truss yesterday, Orlando. I mean, in a diplomatic sense, I guess you'd expect her to say those things, and any Western leader would say those things. But how do you think it will actually play out?
Well, I share those sentiments, as I think we all do. But I think NATO needs to be clear about what victory really means, because what for the Ukrainians would be victory, I think now would entail the expulsion of all Russian forces from Crimea and all occupied territories since 2014. So I don't know if that's really feasible. And so there'll probably have to come a point when hopefully the Ukrainians are in a position of considerable strength. They can open talks with the Russians in order to get, if not all those lands back, then at least most of them with real guarantees of security. But
do you think that's credible now, Orlando? You think that could happen?
My belief in that possibility is dwindling, and increasingly I'm coming around to the view that the only way for this war to end is for Putin to be removed. And now, that's unlikely, I'm afraid, to happen from military defeat alone. I think even, I think he will escalate the war before he's defeated, and that means the possibility of nuclear weapons. But I think the more likely scenario of the war coming to an end by Putin's removal is internal revolt, or enough of a problem internally, domestically, for those who want to ditch the Putin ship to find someone else to come in and begin talks with the Ukrainians. So I think that announcement of the annexation with these sham referenda is precisely for the domestic audience to try and say, look, it's Russia being attacked. We have no beef with the Ukrainians, but Ukraine has been taken over by the Americans, and they're wanting to dismantle Russia. So that's, in a sense, already sort of a rhetoric of desperation to say that we have to defend our national borders, albeit those now coming into Ukrainian territory.
Orlando, stay with me. I just want to get the views of the panel on some of that. Belle, what do you think?
Well, I agree with Orlando's assessment. Putin is clearly desperate. He's losing in a way that he didn't expect he would. There's this idea of Russian might that is failing. The Ukrainians, obviously they've suffered huge losses, but they're pushing back in a way that they didn't expect. And so now he's come up with these sham referendums, attempting to make it look probably to his people with whom the war has become very unpopular, as if they're defending something, they're defending Russian land, they're defending people that don't want to be part of Ukraine. And we just need to keep supporting them as much as we possibly can.
Do you share Orlando's assessment that it is unlikely that Ukraine will be able to recover all of the territory that it has lost?
I think it is definitely a concern. We don't know what will happen in the future. We weren't even sure that we would get to a point where we'd be having this all-out war. But I think it's going to be something for discussions moving forward. But we do need to get rid of Putin in order to make sure those discussions are had. Nobody is going to have discussions with him, let's say, given where he's gone with things over the future of Ukraine.
Ed?
I think that's right. I mean, Putin has to go for this war genuinely to end, and I bow to Orlando. I have his book at home, but given his extensive knowledge of Russian history, but revolutions, as it were, can happen very quickly. And it strikes me that if you have hundreds of thousands of young men leaving their families to escape the draft, and hundreds of thousands of young and middle-aged men apparently going into the army and leaving their families and effectively being cannon fodder in Ukraine, at some point there must be a critical mass of people who will say enough is enough. Now, I don't know enough about Putin's inner circle to know who has the power and who could make the move, but it strikes me if you risk the lives or indeed kill so many of your own citizens in a war that you have failed to win, you are not going to last that much longer.
Orlando, you were nodding there. I just wonder, do you think that the kind of the forced signing up of people in Western Russia, is that something that potentially could make a difference?
Yes, I mean, they can get the manpower out there, although, you know, it's going to take them a few months. And they've got very demoralised troops on the front line. So this is the opportunity for the Ukrainians to push ahead as far as possible. But I think that it's not really anymore for Putin about the manpower even. I mean, they want to hold the lines in the east and the south, but I think they will reach for different forms of warfare. I mean, I think, you know, the energy crisis is going to be their main weapon. And added to that, I think they will use more long-range missiles to take out the Ukrainian infrastructure. And that means there will be another refugee crisis. Many of those who left Ukraine in the first days of the war have returned. But if there's no electricity or water in large Ukrainian cities, that flood of refugees will head west again. Okay. So I think that's a weapon he's aiming to use, right, rather than a demoralised army who can do probably no more than just hold the ground.
OK, Orlando Figes, thank you so much for joining us. Just a quick final thought from you, Matt.
I just wish the West would have acted after he annexed Crimea, after he poisoned Litvinenko, after he poisoned the Skripals, and instead we had Boris Johnson putting Lebedev in the House of Lords and Jeremy Corbyn asking questions on behalf of the Kremlin.
Olivia?
Yeah, I think that Putin is absolutely backed into a corner, and I think I completely agree with everyone that the only solution is that he goes. But I don't see that happening particularly soon. Like, yes, you've got a very infuriated and demoralised population, but in Russia it's the elites, the Russian elites, the people around Putin who make the big decisions. And although it sounds like there are mutterings there, it doesn't look like there's a huge overthrowing about to happen. So I think it's going to get a lot worse for everyone before it ends.
Ed?
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, you know, obviously what we're not talking about is this kind of nuclear option that people talk about, and whether or not that would be on the cards or chemical warfare. So there is a point where, you know, in a way the Ukraine conflict has been contained, horrific as it is. And I agree with Orlando that other forms of warfare like energy, particularly as we head into the winter, are going to have a huge impact. But what do we do if Putin escalates and uses forms of warfare that have no international authority whatsoever? That is going to be a real dilemma for the West. It may bring China onto our side.
OK, all right, we're going to have to leave it there. Thank you to all of my guests. I will be back tomorrow with Politics UK at 12:15. You can get that on BBC Two or BBC iPlayer. Joe Coburn will be back on Monday with more Politics Live. Bye-bye for now.